Hello everyone, and welcome to Happy Times and Places, which is a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I get a friend to nominate a story and choose in secret their favourite things about it. I have to then commentate along and guess what those favourite things might be.
Hello, Toby. It's Paul Litchfield here. 1/3 of the podcast noise that is a wheezing, groaning sound. Categorically, of course, the only Doctor Who podcast available. Now, it's just me, I'm afraid. My fellow companions can't be with me at the moment. Tom Neenan is relacquering his recorder in the Zero room, and John Rain is walking his new dog, which is a cross between a pug and Adric, which means every time he throws a stick, it always comes back with something else. Also, I'm audio only at the moment, as I've currently lent out my face at the very last minute to the Scarlioni family somewhere in Paris. Anyway, my choices for you are the two-parter, David Tennant two-parter, that is Human Nature and Family of Blood, which I really enjoyed. So I'm going to tell you the bits I really genuinely adored about both episodes, and then I'll give you my super duper overall joy, love about the whole thing.
Well, welcome everybody, and thanks to guest Paul Litchfield, who is a member of the Wheezing Groaning Sound, as he said, which is a wonderful Doctor Who podcast. I don't think I've ever actually met Paul. We know a lot of the same people. He was in a brilliant sketch group with one of the sons of Roger Lim, erstwhile Doctor Who incidental music composer. So I'm surprised Paul didn't choose one of those stories in order to just do one long name drop. But I'm delighted Paul has joined me. The Wheezing Groaning Sound, if you do not know it, is a superb Doctor Who podcast. It's a bit naughtier than anything that the sort of level I pitch these at, and I have to say not quite as fastidious about the factualities of a programme. There's some very erroneous speculation as to the reality of certain situations, but that's not what they're there for. They are there to have a great deal of fun. They love Doctor Who. They're also not afraid to kick it about the park, and they do so with great good humour and invention and bonhomie and joyousness. I really enjoy their podcast, so I hope this has given you a flavour of Paul and makes you seek out the stuff that they do. Not to the extent that you stop listening to one man droning on through an episode. Yes, funny that. I was thinking about this podcast today. I was talking to lovely Jim Sangster, who did such a good job on the Caveman episodes, which was one of these that I felt really sort of came together, because it's odd, this, expecting you to listen to one person just saying things during an episode of Doctor Who. So I don't quite know what you're doing, but I am grateful. You're in my house. I'm looking at it's not a cheese plant, but it's a something of that ilk that is dying as I look at it. I got it we've got a plinth at the back that needs something to go on it to give it a bit of height. So I got this thing for Shez for Christmas, and I said it's got to be something that can sort of exist in the shadows and doesn't need much maintenance, because it's just sort of sprucing up a corner. And they said, oh yeah, absolutely this, and it's as I said, it's dying as I speak. It had 3 bits of leafy growth on it, and one of the bits had leafy growth on has died. And they said the things that kill it are either overwatering, we haven't overwatered it, or not enough sunlight, so it's actually not fit for the purpose I bought it for. So it's now standing by the window, and I'm hoping to revive it. Patrons, so you see, so patrons, you can follow the progress of the cheese plant if I remember to mention it again. Non-patrons, I mean, you're so far behind that when I record these, it might already be dead as I speak. It's already gone by the time it's come into your sphere of existence. Anyway, so if that's not a reason to become a patron, I don't know what is. Anyway, I felt the need to do some New Who. I was going to do Survival. Benjamin Cook. Famous Benjamin Cook, millions of Twitter followers. Benjamin Cook has done Survival, but I've done, and I've been afraid a bit. And I was going to do that tonight, and I've been a bit afraid of doing New Who because I can't. If I've lost for something to say in a bit of classic Who, I can probably tell you what football team one of the bit part actors supported. I don't have that with this, and I don't think I can't have seen many of these stories as many times as I've seen the classic ones. There hasn't been as much time, and I've had things to do. And yet, I'm taking you back to the golden age. Can we have a golden age already of New Who? I mean, there are people who were born when the episodes I'm about to watch were broadcast, who are now, near adulthood and capable of doing things, and have made some giant steps betwixt then and now. I've just sort of meandered. Anyway, it's a sobering thought, but cards on the table. I this is a story I'm very much looking forward to revisiting. And certainly enjoying it in the presence of Paul, who is a very, very witty fellow. So I'm grateful to you for being there or here. You're in my house. Welcome. Yeah, we've got a dying cheese plant. It's not a cheese plant. I can't remember what it's called. It's after midnight because I can only do this when the working day is done and my other half is tired of my fascinating conversations about the apostrophe positioning on Howard's Way and whether Vera Lorimer really understood Blake Seven, and so that's seeing her off. And now we're going to do Human Nature. I have it on BBC iPlayer, and I am going to press play in. Let me just get it on the old, because we're in the future. I've got it on iPlayer. I have it on disc, but I've got it on iPlayer. Right, it's going to start in 3, 2, 1. And I mean, it starts. Oh, I love a laser beam. I'm easily pleased. I love a laser beam. And in fact, I've just been doing an 80s story. I don't know quite what order these are going to come out in, but I've just done an 80s story that has a couple of laser beams, and they made me very, very happy. So seeing a laser beam in New Who, just seeing it sort of hot on the heels of the Doctor there into the TARDIS, I think is a great way to begin. In fact, I think this admirable, the way this begins at such a lick, the way that there's some big things going on here. So the villains are already established. The community. If I'd written this whole setup would have been so laboured. I'm writing something at the moment, and I look at it, and I go, I really need to, condensing stuff is really part of the art of good writing, and I know how easy it is to sort of go, well, they might not understand this. I really need to explain the mechanics of it. And good science fiction explains the mechanics at a lick. It doesn't mean you have to explain them, but there's a real art, I think, in condensing the sort of setup, and this not only does that and introduces some big concepts, the chameleon arch and the watch and this pursuing bunch of aliens, but gets us into the story, and what this story is, the story of John Smith at the school, before the credits, before the titles, before the opening titles. And I think that is a remarkable feat, an excellent feat of writing, and certainly not what I expected, knowing what the sort of story was going to be about. I expected there to be a bit of a build-up, and this would be a big moment, within the opening episode. Oh my God, Doctor Who's going to have to be somebody else. No, we're going to pretty much start with him being somebody else, and of course it's nice for Martha, actually, but sort of being in the driving seat in a way. I think that's a really nice dynamic to give our leads. I'm just going to use this opportunity of the opening theme. I love this opening title sequence to say, Alexa, Volume 5. Because I don't want to wake the house or the neighbourhood up with I love the violins of this theme tune. I remember when I first heard those, and I thought, this is new, but I like it. Because, of course, there's still part of me that only likes things that are old. And but I remember loving this one. Now, because we'd had a preview, because there'd been, one of these kids is out of step. I'm sure one of these kids is a Corporal Jones. Yes, he is. Look at him. And he's not quite, his gait isn't quite as good as everybody else's. Anyway, He's probably runs the RSC now. Ha ha ha. I think this whole setup of this story is superb, because I think there's something about England of the past that is very compelling to us, because it speaks to our identity, part of our identity that we have cast off because we do not do things this way, and yet our culture is sort of embedded in a lot of the attitudes that were formed or if they were not formed here, they're already embedded here. It takes a long time to iron out tradition, and we look at some things from the past and go, oh my good God, did we really live like that? But you also look at other things and go, oh, but there are certain things, even if it's just things like manners, which I know is very passé to talk about these days, but that you sort of go, but I kind of quite like the fact that we have codes of honor and stuff like that. But of course, codes of honor that are then exposed, as that scene does very simply and efficiently, and by the fact that Martha is played by Martha is a companion of color. It automatically shows that for many people want to return to the values of times gone by. Values becomes a very interesting word, but equally, I'm not a blind basher of the past and all that it is either. And I think this story and the way that it deals with the attitudes of times gone by, nearly over 100 years ago now, and yet with recognizable sorts of people. Isn't that a sobering thought? Yes, of course. Everybody depicted in this will be dead now, and yet look and sound. It's not like watching something from the 1700s or something. There's still enough of us in these people. It's curious. I find that terribly moving. As I get older, I get very wobbly about mortality, and about not just my own, but about the fact that I know a lot of people who've died. Not a week goes by these days. Well, that's partially, as a friend of mine says, because if your social circle is largely character actors who had their heyday in the 1960s, what do you expect? But not only that, contemporaries of mine as well. And I find the fragility of life quite moving, and the importance of individual lives, which of course this talks about, because we talk about the great number of casualties in World War One, but each of those casualties was an individual person. And what this captures so brilliantly was not only a person, but a person who'd only just left school. My goodness. And I mean, you look at kids today and you go, well, they're cocky bunch, but they wouldn't be able to do this sort of thing. And that's interesting, because it sort of shows that the bravado of youth actually hides a lot of fragility. And again, those contrary things, I think, are fascinating to grapple. And I think it does all of this with the backdrop of where it's a science fiction story about an eccentric time traveler being pursued by a family of alien mayflies, essentially. Word for Jessica Hines, who I think is excellent. I had the very great pleasure of working with her subsequently to this. She and I both wrote part of a trilogy of plays about Spike Milligan. I don't know why I was chosen. And they were performed live in Hull. Jessica was in hers. Oh, I was in mine. Did I narrate mine? I was in mine a bit. Jessica's was a monologue. And another lovely writer called Lee Mattinson. And we had... Did we have Doctor Who people in it? Actually, it wasn't a very Doctor Who-y cast. Mark Keep was in mine, but he's not been in Doctor Who, but he's associated with Jessica. Anyway, I digress. The set design here is excellent. All of this, the period is done very well. But I think the whole period with the way that these two interact with each other, this is beautiful, and this is very evocative. All these pictures of the dreams, and it's great to see the gas mask kid there, and that's pretty. Just seeing a Dalek in ink, I think, is great. The Mox of Balhoun. I think this is such a great conceit, and I have to make a confession. I've never read the book. See, this is why I reject any suggestion that I'm some kind of authority on Doctor Who, because there's whole chunks that the new adventures. I feel like a traitor in a way, but when they came out, I was broke. I was a student. I suppose if I'd been a proper Doctor Who fan, I would have saved my Paul McGann is canon. Oh, what a moment that is, because of course this is before the next Doctor, where we see them in clips, but those pictures, it's very evocative, that as well. And of course, because a diary and a journal is such a personal thing, it's a very good way of giving an insight into his mind without him saying anything, because it's his subconscious. It's very artfully done, that. It's a very sensitively judged performance from Jessica Hines. This. She's quite a talent. She was doing a film about a boxer when we did the Spike Milligan thing that she wrote and was in. She's quite a talent. I think she's absolutely beautiful in this, and especially as she's well known for, really well known for Spaced and for comedy. I always think it's great when Doctor Who gives comedy actors the chance to do something straight and prove that actually, if you can make people laugh, you can do the other stuff as well. And somehow it just seems to work slightly better for me in science fiction, because we're dealing with the otherworldly and the strange. It seems less incongruous than it might seeing somebody in a gritty police drama or something. Although I would still welcome that. I like watching actors doing things that I don't expect them to do. But I know that can jolt an audience. An audiences sometimes like their actors to do the thing that they like to see them doing, which is why you often have stars who are pretty much the same in everything, because what they do is very likable. But I love the fact that Jessica Hines gets to show a real depth. What a cast, though! Thomas Brodie Sangster. I knew his agent I got to know his agent, who then wasn't his agent for much longer, because I think he then joined Curtis Brown or somebody, but who was his agent when he did this. Harry Lloyd, whose performance as the baddie in this, I think is quite phenomenal. So we'll, I'm sure, talk about him a lot later. It's a terrific cast. It's amazing, actually, and it's kudos to Andy Pryor, the casting director, how many people that you might not have known then, you definitely know now. I mean, Rebecca Staten's done so many different things. Again, sort of used to comedy. Does a lot of comedy. And this is a nice friendship that they have. And as I say, yes, I didn't know the story. I knew what it was. I knew that it was the Doctor, becomes human and is in a school. But no, I didn't do the New Adventures. I did a few. Maybe if I got one free with a magazine, or if occasionally I got gifted one or something like that. So I read a handful. But I had to do a lot of reading. I was doing English and a drama degree, an English degree and a drama degree, and there was a lot of reading for that. So, and I'd bought a trunk full of my VHS videos. I mean, I brought all of my Doctor Who videos with me to university. That seems insane now. But, so that I could watch Doctor Who when, as it turned out, usually when none of my other housemates were in. I wouldn't be without my Doctor Who collection. I mean, you young uns now who have it all transportable, or you don't even have it transportable on discs. You have it. It's on iPlayer. It's online. But I carted mine round in a big old trunk. why am I talking about that? Because that predates this. Virgin, the New Adventures, I have to be honest, I knew Paul Cornell was a fan, and I didn't like the idea of fans writing Doctor Who things, the books, because it all comes from self-loathing, believe you me, and probably a bit of jealousy. That it enabled me to go, that's not proper, because they're fans. Of course, that is nonsense. Paul Cornell is an A-list, very capable writer. I knew nothing about... I think I'd read a couple of comic strips they'd written in some early things or whatever. But no, I didn't know. But I knew all these guys, and they all knew each other, and they were fans, and I wasn't bothered enough to be deeply resentful, but I was askance at it, and that is entirely down to me. But bear in mind, I was young. I was 18, 19, whatever. I desperately wanted to be, I had an uncertain future. And in my future, I wanted to be an actor, a writer, a performer. I love Doctor Who. So these people who all knew each other were doing this stuff that the only way I could sort of go... but sort of not take that personally was to dismiss it, Again, this is all largely subconscious. I wasn't that bothered, and I certainly wasn't pissed off about it, but it enabled me to go, it enabled me to be, I'm not that bothered about it. Of course, somebody being a Doctor Who fan does not stop them writing good Doctor Who. Somebody being a Doctor Who fan does not stop them being a very good and able creative person in their own right. Irrespective of whether they like Doctor Who or not. And there's some Doctor Who fans who've written some brilliant stuff for television and film and radio and theatre and not written any Doctor Who. And there are some Doctor Who fans who've done all those things and written for Doctor Who, and Paul Cornell is one of them. And indeed, he's one of the first. Is he the first person to have written an episode and also chosen an episode for Happy Times and Places? As I record this, I've just... recently released for patrons, so it will have come out before this for everybody. Paul talking about the Curse of Peladon. He's a very, very nice guy, and a very interesting and committed and political guy, but who loves his Doctor Who, and I think is a terrific writer. I love Father's Day as well. I think Father's Day is a terrific episode, and I would very much like to see Paul Cornell write a lot more Doctor Who. I think he really knows how to do it, and he really knows how to do those to inject emotion into stories and a humanity and the imagination just of the concepts. I think this is such a brilliant idea. It's such a great way of exploring the character without fiddling about with the character or taking anything away from the character. But exploring aspects, and it doesn't let the Doctor off the hook. And there's there are some morally grey areas in everybody's behaviour in this that aren't necessarily hugely flagged up. They're there for you to see and for you to experience, but it doesn't sort of come out and put them front and centre all of the time. Even it presents them to you, and you go away and ponder them. Now, I love Harry Lloyd. I think he's really brilliant and odd here. The only thing that takes it away from me slightly, because I love him from now on, is that he was slightly odd when the spaceship landed, when he was being him, and he's sort of slightly what, and it just seems slightly arch and slightly weird. And I think it needed to dial down that slightly sort of eccentric oddity, because that's what this bit has. That's the only slight caveat I have in my otherwise undying joy of this performance, because I think he's one of the great Doctor Who villains. I think it's an absolutely terrific performance, and when I rewatched this, over and over again, as I was wont to do when these stories went out, I couldn't get enough of what he was doing. Isn't this the bit where there's the incidental music did have some whistling in it? It was vetoed by Russell T Davies and Julie Gardner, I think. And is then the whistling on the actual soundtrack? Do we have it? I remember there was a bit of back and forth. I think it was mentioned in Doctor Who magazine that There's something lovely about having the TARDIS sort of hidden away in a barn, and again, all of that is very pithily dealt with. You know, the sort of bit, we don't waste time going how do they hide the TARDIS? Why does nobody find the TARDIS? You know, boom, 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 boom. Get rid of all of that. It's a beautiful score. I'm a big fan of Murray Gold too. I love this period of Doctor Who. I remember there was a break? There was a break for the Eurovision. So at the end of 42? They had a sort of, because it's not on for 2 weeks, coming next. The next time trailer was not the next time trailer for this episode. It was next time trailer for the rest of the series. So it had We Want the Doctor. It had Jared Horan doing that, didn't it? But then it had this. So it felt like this was the beginning of another season, even though we'd only had a week off for Eurovision, because they were so good at that kind of thing. Then of dripping you just enough clips to make every week seem like a headline, every week seem like something momentous, and then even just by the virtue of having a week off, they went, well, we'll make it seem like this second chunk of the season is another sort of on the way to another blockbuster. It was the way it was packaged. I mean, just purely aside from the fact that it's really high quality acting, writing, and directing, all of this stuff, the way that the show was packaged as an entity is I think, in a lesson in keeping the audience interested. This whole flashback here, telling us just what we need to know, but doing it now that we're in the midst of the story, is a brilliant conceit, because the story's getting on with itself now. The aliens have arrived and stuff's going on, but now Martha's filling us in. The score that is upping the ante there. Even though this is in sort of retrospect, this is, as I say, this is backstory, but it's backstory being fed to us because it's having an impact on what's happening now. It's having an impact on Martha, who's a little bit stuck. And I mean, Tennant's great at that sort of all that stuff. It's really well packaged and managed storytelling. And I'm delighted they cut the bit where I've done a whole podcast about this, where the Doctor says he doesn't like pears. Doctor Who is an example to children. Fussy eaters are not, to me, an example to children. I was made to eat everything, and because my mum grew all the vegetables that we ate, because we didn't have an awful lot to play with, and it made me the man I am today. And there was stuff that I hated as a kid that I love now because I was made to eat it and I got used to it. And I think instilling the idea that when I see parents go, "You won't like that," I think, what are you doing? Now they won't, because you've put that idea into their heads. So I'm glad that and I know the not liking pears thing is now canon, because it was in Peter Capaldi's last speech and everything. So it's not a battle I've won. The battle of Pear Tree Farm. I know somebody lives. Anyway, let's not get into that. He's got and thank you. That's so sweet. She does really well, this Free Management. He's got a great face, hasn't he? Thomas Brady Sankster. He's got a wonderful, and he's had a great career. If you've not seen The Queen's Gambit, that's a great show. That I think he might have got nominated for an Emmy or something. One of those, or the ensemble cast did. It was a largely British cast playing Americans. Patrick Troughton's grandson is in it. Harry Denning. Lots of British actors in this American show. Lots of British actors doing well over the other side of the pond. This young man included, and he's great in this, and he's a great character, and he's got a terrific sort of urchin face. I love that turn of Harry Lloyd to camera. It's Charles Palmer, isn't it, directing this, who does a cracking job. I think Doctor Who in a period setting I always love, because I said it before, it's the incongruity, it's the it's John Pertwee said it best: the Yeti on your loo in Tooting Bec. It's the the police box on an alien vista, or in an ancient building, or an old-fashioned setting. Things out of time. That's what time travel allows us. It allows us the incongruity of the ancient and the modern clashing, and that's a great visual, but it's also a great dynamic. It's useful for storytelling. It's useful for character. It's just useful thematically. And of course, this looks like the Chameleon Arch is, it is just there for. I love that, the sniff. It's just those little touches that say that they're alien. It looks like it's just there for this story, and it's it justifies its existence for this story because it's there to disguise the Doctor. But of course, it then comes back and repays its presence big time for when the season starts to gear towards the finale, and it kicks Utopia into a completely different direction. Jared Horan is an actor that should have been in Doctor Who by this point. Oh, I forgot the Scarecrows are brilliant. I'm loving a Scarecrow is a Doctor Who thing. I think the design of those Scarecrows is absolutely fantastic. It's the Scarecrow mark of the Rani, isn't there? It's the Master, isn't it, where the Scarecrow does a thing, and that's quite a thing of sort of scary drama. Somebody walks past a Scarecrow and it moves. So it's not an unknown thing. But I think the design, the sort of sad face, and I think the genius of that sort of sackcloth gait that they have. That because it's almost got the sort of sad, the Scarecrow of the Wizard of Oz thing, but it's a perverse, monstrous version. But that sort of ragdolly kind of gait that they have is absolutely right. It says Scarecrow, but it's also sort of perverse and sort of scary, but with a slight sort of melancholy and sadness and dopiness. It's like the dopey Scarecrow, isn't it, from Wizard of Oz? So it flirts with almost being humorous, but isn't. That's what makes it scary. And again, it's that thing of being a parody of what we sort of know. It's recognisable. You would expect a Scarecrow to move like that. Why would you? Because Scarecrows don't move. But it kind of makes a sort of sense, and because it makes a sort of sense, and we sort of we recognise the incongruity, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, and this is all great because it sums up the sort of the harshness of this world. Kids had to grow up so fast, and when people, I was reading something the other day about a sort of return to discipline in schools and that sort of thing. And as an older person who's slightly frightened of gobby teenagers, I sort of part of me goes, yeah, that's what we need, a bit of a. But actually, the sort of discipline that created these very upright people, as we think of in the past, created some really screwed up people, and had a seam of violence and cruelty and unfairness running through it. And what's interesting is seeing the Doctor absolutely fine about corporal punishment, which we find absolutely appalling. There was still corporal punishment at school when I was at school. I mean, I think my period at school saw the sort of the easing off out of it. But yeah, I'm that old. I saw people getting their bottoms smacked, which would have you struck off now as a teacher. But the whole preparing for World War I setting just gives the story an extra sort of emotional, moral heft and a really interesting backdrop that, again, we don't get any stern lectures about it. We don't get any chin stroking about it. It's there, and we judge it or we don't. And actually, it's not judged 100% good. Pip Torrens as the headmaster. I mean, when you've got Pip Torrens, what, 4th or 5th on the guest cast, you have a good guest cast, because he's a mighty fine actor. He's currently in Succession, playing the sort of man that wears salmon-coloured trousers to a wedding. He's a wonderful actor, Pip Torrens. I mean, one of our best actors. I'd love to see him come back to Doctor Who to do more. But the fact that he's playing, a relative, it's still a great part, but he's not the main guest star, which an actor of his heft, should definitely be. I love the Doctor's coat and hat combo. Those are the sort of clothes I'd like to wear and get away with wearing, but I have neither the shape nor the gait nor the posture for it, and I would just end up looking like I'd spent the night in a hedge. It's one of the many things that makes me sad. This is a funny. This sequence must have taken ages to do. It's a bit of silly, which the story could totally live without, and it will never be a highlight for me of the story, and yet it's absolutely brilliant, and really well done, and the amount of work that must have gone into it. But for me, it's a kind of it's a distraction from the story, and yet it just goes to show what a high quality piece of work that this is. That this sort of disposable bit, and actually slightly silly bit, is actually a bravura piece of television, technically, and he acts it so well. Oh, they're so delightful, these two, you extraordinary man. Yeah, and that laugh that he does in spite of himself. He's such a good actor, Tennant. And this musing that they have about a girl in every fireplace, all of that. I do love these scarecrows. I'm a fan. Can you tell? Choosing it's 3 things per episode, and then a bonus thing I have to choose. Gallifrey, is that in Ireland? That's lovely, and that gets a major payoff, doesn't it? But that finds its roots. Does it in Black Orchid? I think certainly mentioned. Is it? Yeah. Is it? No. Traken is. Oh, I don't know. Sydney and Verity, lovely touch. I wonder if there's a deleted scene where he goes, my parents were called Sydney and Verity, and my uncle was called David Whitaker, and my second cousin twice removed was called Mervyn, and then there were my best mates at school, Warris and Terry, and this and cousin Anthony from Australia, but we lost touch with him very quickly. I don't know why I've done it all in that accent. I love those drawings. If I'd been the set person who did those drawings, I would have hung on to them and sold them for a fortune. But no, I would never. That's the problem when people say, "Oh, I haven't got anything from Doctor Who, but hang on to that. Might come in useful one day." I'd go, "Well, yeah, but I mean, I can't even throw away a tatty copy of Doctor Who Adventures that has been half destroyed by children because it's a Doctor Who thing. I couldn't throw any Doctor Who thing away. Doctor Who's kissing, and of course Doctor Who is allowed to kiss because it's not Doctor Who kissing. It's because I'm very much in the. I don't want to see Doctor Who kissing. There's kissing goes on in any other number of programs. As a kid, one of the appeals of Doctor Who was that it wasn't about romance and that sort of thing, but this, of course, plays entirely into that and it's absolutely fine because it's not Doctor Who, it's John Smith, but it plays with what we have. It actually plays with a particular sort of fan, of which I am one, who goes, I don't want hanky panky in the TARDIS. I don't want lovey dovey stuff, and yet, if you flirt with it, and of course the stuff with Rose I loved, I was fell hook, line and sinker for all of that. So there's another thing as well of actually what you think might be the end of the world sometimes isn't. But this plays with all of that and is actually a vital part of the storytelling. The fact that we're not used to seeing the Doctor in love, and certainly not kissing. This. Oh, and let's not shy away from the fact that the family of Blood's victims have been, yes, the farmer and the public schoolboy and a child with a balloon. I love that the little tilt of the head and the sniffing, they are such great villains because they're just slightly peculiar. Again, they're slight parodies of people that we kind of know. I mean, we don't really know the farmer or the little girl, but but they're people. And the fact, and it's very, very sad. And Rebecca Staten's great here. Oh, and it's because we get more than just her being sort of dragged off, which is all that sort of happened with the farmer and the little girl. We actually see her in the sort of spaceship, almost begging for her life, and being so upset because she's so innocent and so sort of humble that it seems sort of so cruel because she's a sort of a guileless and sort of rather simple kind of character and he's so good the way that he does all of that, but it's so horrible because that also buys into the fact that she's a cleaner and he's of good stock, or the person she thinks he is of good stock, and it's got that sort of patronizing element to it that actually reflects the reality of that dynamic in the outside world and sort of makes it quite rightly seem, even more disgusting, because it is quite disgusting that because of somebody's place in inverted commas, a young man, can patronize a grown woman or whatever. So it's got, again, because it has all of that stuff underneath it as a sort of subtext, not even a subtext, but just as because the setting brings all of that with it. It informs everything on so much of a better level. I think it's really interesting and speaks to us as a society and of what we think, what we expect, what how we've changed, and actually also how we haven't. And part of me does go, I think the world was a better place when we drank tea out of china cups and saucers and all of that sort of stuff. All of that sort of oldie worldy stuff I find very appealing because I've got just enough of a foot in that world, because I can feel that room. I can feel that room that they're in, before there was central heating and when there were big old buildings that were cold and beds that just had blankets on, all of that sort of stuff. I still have a tiny foot in that world. It's and when I was a kid, there were people around for whom this time was a living memory. So, and this is I don't know why the family of blood don't know what some food is, but it's a clever way of it's a useful way of showing Martha realizing that something's wrong. I like the fact that it doesn't take long for the alien to realize that Martha's cottoned on, because that would undermine the alien if Martha had found out and the alien was absolutely clueless, because it would automatically go, these guys aren't up to much. I don't quite buy the yes. I'll just say I'd like an elephant sandwich, and the aliens will go, well, that sounds fine to me, because I under what other circumstances I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go to work on my marmalade bicycle. Well, of course you are. I don't why they know what some words mean and not others, but it's. I think it sort of works. That's brilliant. Cultural differences. That is glorious, because we love John Smith and he's a nice guy, and these are both nice guy, but they have attitudes that are appalling to us. And that, that's deep. And I love her reaction to, the sort of patronizing, the, cultural differences. This is a book. That's brilliant. And that's, again, it's not remotely heavy-handed. It's not us with the benefit of, modern perspectives going, oh, weren't these people stupid? Which is exactly what those characters are guilty of. It's that's really, I like the sort of cutting to the future. They never, we never quite explain why Thomas Brodie Sangster is psychic and has the future thing. But again, it's a sort of important element of the story, just in the sense that it gives him a little bit of a different perspective, and it impacts the plot slightly. But again, there's no sort of, we don't need to sort of sit down and have a massive scene about it. If we can accept, alien Mayfly beasts and their spaceship and their tail, we can accept the fact that this young lad, for whatever reason, has slightly enhanced psychic powers. I was astonished that this doorman is Derek Smith. Derek Smith, I've seen his bottom. I mean, Midsummer Night's Dream. He was bottom. Lois Baxter was Titania from Androids of Tara. Jim McManus from The Invisible Enemy was Snout. Oh, Michael Goldie from The Wheel in Space, and Craddock from Daleks 2150 AD was Snug. At Ludlow Castle, directed by Peter Cregeen, who destroyed Doctor Who. But Derek Smith, aside from the fact that I saw him play Bottom, which is, the star part, really, and a great production. Modern dress, the denizens of Ludlow did not approve. Shakespeare's in the olden days. You could set it in the Edwardian era, that's fine, that's the olden days, but you couldn't set it in modern dress. A great alien acting here from these two. They are brilliant characters, all of these aliens. But Derek Smith is playing. He's the lead baddie in Shadow, the Blake 7 episode. He's one of the leads in The Guardians, excellent sort of dystopian future thing. I love the fact the girl still got a balloon. It's really haunting. But this year, Derek Smith, I mean, he's in his 90s now. He's on Facebook. I sort of admire that he could have long retired, but Derek, they want you to do a handful of lines in Doctor Who. Yeah. And, he's one of those actors that if he'd been in Doctor Who, when the classic series was on, which he could have been at any point during his run, he'd have been the guest lead. He'd have been, I don't know, Professor Marius. He'd have been Dr. Fendelman or Count Federico. One of those. He could have been any of those sorts of characters. I suppose in the 60s he might have been Arthur Terrell in Evil of the Daleks or somebody. But he's a really class act. And I assumed he'd just retired, and then I saw it's Derek Smith. But that's the nature of the business, isn't it? You're not going to keep working when you're in your mid-70s, 80s, 90s. But you can, if you choose, make yourself available for work, and that's clearly what he did. And occasionally they go, "We need somebody who's in their mid-80s." I'll do it. I don't care. So good for you, Derek Smith. Good to see you. He played Polonius at the Royal Exchange to the Hamlet of Robert Lindsay. Some other good actors in that as well. I can't remember who now. I really like the fact that good close up for Derek. Oh, and this is horrible. It's horrible. And again, because that's an old war veteran, I find that it's a terrible thing that's somebody who will have been in absolutely perilous sort of situations, who then is sort of wasted, literally, by the cruel indifference of this really horrible alien. And Jared Horan, he really should have been in Doctor Who before now. Zap, you get killed as well. Yeah, and it's a nice just effect, that as well. Jared Horan, he was in London's Burning. He's put on a bit of weight since he was on telly. He was on telly a lot in the 80s, where he wasn't quite, he didn't have quite such a sort of chin. He was quite, because he was younger. I'm not being rude, I'm not being casting any aspersions, but he had particularly sort of he had a sort of jug-eared, slightly gormless countenance that he played upon. He's an excellent classical actor. He's a close associate of Kenneth Branagh, but he'd got a face that suited particular sorts of parts in the 80s, and he's one of the regular sort of patients in The Singing Detective next to Michael Gambon. next to David Ryle, and he was in London's Burning as well as a sort of hapless firefighter, and this is and so it's good to see him, but he's really heavy in this, and he's really forceful and villainous, and he's always an actor I liked in the 80s. It was always nice to see him pop up in things, but he's in Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing as is it Borachio thug. So he's one of those actors that I was pleased to see pop up in Doctor Who. He's a good actor. David Tennant makes a mistake actually in the commentary for this, where he says, he turns up as a voice of one of the Toclafane, because I think David Tennant had misread the credits because it's Jared Logan. So it always goes, even a primary source get things wrong, so you double check before you write it in the history books, people. There's me talking about, and yes, let's not get this cast-related fact on a commentary wrong, rather than talk about the gloriousness of the Doctor's moral dilemma, which is a brilliantly set up cliffhanger. Then that makes all the disparate parts of the story and all the different pulls that the character of the Doctor. Well, the Doctor's not really been in it, because the Doctor has been subsumed by John Smith, who doesn't really exist. And there's all that sort of stuff about identity. Well, John Smith is a real person and is free of the Doctor, and has, and does some things, as I say, like the being indifferent to corporal punishment. We go, we're not really sure about that. But then in other ways, he's better than the Doctor, because reintroducing the Doctor to him makes for some awful pragmatic decision. And this is a very clever throw forward, because it makes us think we're gonna see the Doctor living a life with Joan, and the way that actually manifests itself in the in the story as it turns out next week is very different. So even the trailer is very, very sneaky, and it slightly lets you down, because you think, what? Deliberately it made me go, I don't want to see him get married and have kids. I want this story. So the trailer's setting me up to be disappointed, and then of course when it actually reveals why it's showing you those things and what it's a relief. So it sort of almost promises you what you don't want from the story in a way, and then doesn't give you that, and then you're pleased. Clever, so clever. Oh, what a superb episode that is. It's got everything you want. Wonderful villains. It's a period setting. The leads are great. The guest cast are great. The ideas are superb. It's top notch. So, what are my three favourite things about human nature? Well, God. I think all of these are probably going to touch on what Paul chooses, and I'm just going to slightly miss out. So there's no point in even trying to second guess. So just what are your favourite things, Toby? Well, I think all that, the alienness of the alien. Yeah, I think the family, just that sniffing Harry Lloyd's looks and deportment, the tilting of the heads, the choosing of the victims. I think they're a great set of villains, and they really work, and they're really creepy, and they're really odd. Love that. I love the way that the story just starts at such a lick. So the whole structuring of the way that they choose to tell the story, the way that they get rid of any sort of ponderous or laborious setting up of the science of it, or exactly who the family are, or why they're chasing the Doctor or whatever, and then 20 minutes talking about the mechanics of the chameleon arch and how it works. Blah, blah, blah. The way that they deal with that is so artfully done. So yeah, the sort of the way it starts, the way it frames, the way it starts, the way it's set up, the whole way it just tells that story with there's so much. I love the period setting, but I'll probably talk a bit about that next week, because there's that. I mean, I'll tell you or before we even begin that well, I know one thing I'm going to choose next week already. But I suppose the third thing is, I think the scarecrows are great. I think this, and I haven't even got, this is all so, I haven't even got to the sort of depth of the Book of Memories or some of the choices of production design, but I think I got to get them there, because he's bound to choose them. I think the design, those downturned mouths, the stitching, their lolloping gait, the fact that they're scarecrows, the scarecrow monsters. So, the family of blood, including those performances, particularly because he's got the better part, Harry Lloyd, but they're all great. But I love Harry Lloyd. But the family, the tilting of the heads, all of that, the whole, everything that they are. The economy of the story and the structuring of the storytelling, and the way that the family and the chameleon arch and everything are so wonderfully woven into the story with such brisk economy, so that we can get on with the meat of the story, which is that beautiful concept. I mean, the concept itself, turning the Doctor into a human, that should be one of the things I've chosen. And if he doesn't choose it this week, I'll probably choose it next week. But I've got a feeling he might choose that. Just the very fundamentals of the story. It's a brilliant idea. Take Doctor Who out of Doctor Who and make Doctor Who human. Oh, brilliant. And my third thing is, but I didn't choose that. My third thing is the scarecrows. There's so many things I could have chosen. Let's see if Paul has chosen any of the things that I chose there.
So, human nature, I think from the off is one of my favourite moments. It's just the fact that the Doctor is genuinely scared and he's panicking. It's really cool to actually see a Doctor that's, completely and utterly not sure what to do. He sort of reminds me of the joy that is Troughton. Whenever Patrick Troughton's Doctor is faced with impossible odds, he has a tendency to go into full-on panic mode, which I really loved. The second thing that I really adore about human nature actually is Martha. I think she's just got the most amazing little bit of work to do in both episodes, actually, but particularly in this one, because she's been lumbered with the task of keeping the Doctor safe, and that means she has to spend her time in servitude. You're not quite entirely sure just how long she spends her time scrubbing floors, being racially slurred. I mean, she's just in the most awful position. She keeps walking into rooms, which is brilliant, and then they keep saying, you need to knock first, and then she sort of, yeah, all right, and then she sort of walks back and knocks. I love all the stuff that she's doing in this episode and the next episode. It's just a really great character arc story for her. She's all sassy normally, and she's being forced to sort of live in the past in a position that she absolutely loathes. And the other thing I really love is the character of Baines, the schoolboy, who once he's transformed into one of the family, he just goes full on. Like, it's a massive theatrical slice of ham, and I really love it. He's just goes insane. The way he stares at people is absolutely amazing. It's genuinely terrifying, his characterization of being taken over by an alien force. In particular, I really like his sideways mouth. His mouth sort of goes up the side of his face like he's been painted by a Picasso. By a Picasso? By the Picasso.
Well, I think I get one of those, because I did specify Harry Lloyd plays Baines in my. I mean, I did sort of cheat sideways by sort of spreading my umbrella over a wider area, but because I'm not even going to get close. I think, because I agreed with the other things that Paul said, particularly about Martha, and Free Imagination is superb, and I really like that that her character. All the way that her character is placed within the story, and the way that the actress rises to the occasion, it's just so cleverly done and placed, and it's brilliant. So I'm going to take a point out of 3, because I'm going to get nowhere, and I I did big up Harry Lloyd and mention him in one of my 3 things. There's still a chance for me, because if he mentions, well, he won't mention the economy thing because that was really specific to where the story started, I suppose. But if he mentions the scarecrows in episode 2, I still get the point for that. That's how it works. But yeah, I'm labouring under no illusions that I stand Snowball's chance in hell. So I'm going to take a point. If the ombudsman in wherever you are decides that I've awarded myself one of those under a misunderstanding of the rules or a perversion of sportsmanship, you can take the point away from me. It's absolutely fine. You can strip me of my happy times and places Olympic status if you so choose. I really enjoy that episode. I think it's a great example of New Who having the spirit of old Doctor Who, and yet doing the sort of storytelling that, for whatever reason, and it's not a slight of old Doctor Who, I loved old Doctor Who, it's my favourite thing in the world, but I have to acknowledge that the sophistication of the storytelling, the ambition, the depth, the humanity, the intelligence, the application of what you can do with the show, doing new things with it without messing about with it. It's all entirely consistent, I think, with what Doctor Who does, even though that's a major shake-up of going, well, what if the Doctor was human? But it still does all those things without shaking the fundamentals of the show as we understand them, not affecting those beyond the confines of the story. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a really classy piece of work. It's legitimately good Doctor Who, but also surprising and new and invigoratingly novel Doctor Who from a Doctor Who novel that I've never read. I should one of these days. I've never read The Mill on the Floss, so I've never even read The Guns of Navarone. There's a lot I've never read. I know. I think I tried to come across somebody. I think I talk like somebody who's read all of the books in order to disguise the fact that I haven't read all that many of them. How terrible. What I have done, though, is I've watched Doctor Who a lot, and so this is why I've invited you to my house. I haven't invited you to my house to talk about F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'm talking about Paul Cornell, who is a legitimate writer, and just because he's a Doctor Who fan does not mean that he should not be writing for Doctor Who, and indeed any number of other things. And I'm not saying this because he's a friend of mine, because I don't know. I only know Paul because I've met him at conventions, and he very then kindly invited me to partake in a fantasy cricket league that we do. But I've only sort of spent a handful of times with him. I find him most agreeable company, but I'm not saying any of this because of that. I think he's or because he contributed to this podcast and did The Curse of Peladon. He's a really classy writer. I love every minute that he's written for Doctor Who, and I'm really delighted. I was worried because I thought, am I gonna? I don't know. I just had a feeling. Oh, perhaps it's a bit. Now once the novelty has worn off, perhaps it's it's just a dusty old story set in a public school, and I don't like the laser guns. I don't like the design of those. I don't know why. I was thinking, perhaps it's not all that good. I don't know. It's something about the shape of them. They're too curved. I think they need to. Yeah, I don't know. I have no logic to it at all. I just don't particularly like the shape of the laser guns. So there's them in my head going, so maybe I don't really like this story. I love this story. It's brilliant. And I'm sure even the laser guns are fine. And they are laser guns, and I do like a laser gun. I love the beams. I just don't like the shape of them. I don't know why. Because they should be a slight, because they shouldn't look like guns. Anyway, sometimes I don't know much about guns, but I know what I like. So I think I was slightly worried that I would be slightly underwhelmed for whatever reason, and because I wasn't in the mood to watch newer Doctor Who, I was in the mood to watch Survival. But I'm glad I watched that because I'm totally invigorated by it. I think it's astonishing. I think it's brilliant. And I know that there is some amazing stuff in the next episode. And it's taken me back to that time when I would get the Radio Times and I would read the previews and I would spend all of my week thinking about next week's Doctor Who. I don't know why, because I had kids and I was working and all that sort of thing. I seem to have less time now. I don't know why, because I was really busy then. But for some reason, for those weeks that Doctor Who was on, it was literally killing time between Saturdays and being so excited. And then the fallout, because it so rarely disappointed and often exceeded expectations. And I knew that this story was big news because it was based on a book that everybody raved about. But that, in effect, made me sort of think, oh, well, is this sort of soiled goods in a way? Because it's already been handled, Somebody's already messed about with it. And I just remember going, oh, God, no, this is something really special. And I think it still is. It's an amazing piece of Doctor Who. So join me next time when we have the continuation of this amazing piece of Doctor Who and one of my favourite segments. Thinking about it just nourishes me in its brilliance of an example. It does something that no other programme, I think, could do so effectively. And its ingredients, all its ingredients together, make no sense if you lay them out, or they make sense within themselves, but you describe them to people and they go and you watch that and it makes you cry. You go, yeah, that's why Doctor Who is what it is. I think you could probably guess which bit I'm talking about. I hope I do it justice. Thank you for listening to this. I love talking about Doctor Who, and it thrills me that there are people out there that are prepared to listen to me do so. I hope this has made you want to scurry back to watch Family of Blood, or if you have been watching Family of Blood with me talking over it, you fools, just watch it. It's great. Not Family of Blood, Human Nature. Family of Blood's next week. But look, I hope this piece of Doctor Who inspires you as much as it inspires me, because it's made me end my day grinning from ear to ear and just thrilled at the possibilities of imaginative, gripping, clever, insightful, intelligent, mad, funny, magical storytelling being done by brilliant people. So with that, it's time for bed. And I'll see you for the Family of Blood next time. Thanks for listening. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest this time around is Paul Litchfield, who can be found on Twitter at Mr. P. Litchfield. He's very, very funny, well worth a follow. I would like to thank him and also show my appreciation to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Quadridors, Rachel T.S., Peter Reed, Paula Reynolds, Alex Rowan, Darren Rule, Gavin Rymil, Tom Selinsky, Samuel, don't have your surname Samuel, Edward Salt, Frank Shales, John Sheehan, Paul Shields, Trevor Smith, Richard Smith, David Spencer, David Spofford, Adam Stone, Paul Taylor-Greaves, Jason Thompson, Sidney Truitt, John Turner, Lee Wakerley, Gary Wales, Jeff Walker, Alistair Wallace, Gavin Ware, Peter Ware, Rich Wiggins, Rhys Williams, Jason Wilshire Mills and Sydney Wilson. The music for these podcasts is by Dave Gates. Oh, and I ran out of time there to credit the logos, which were created by a young man called Dylan Patterson, and they adorn the places that these hang around online when I need a placeholder image. It's the TARDIS wrapped in a scarf and various different backgrounds done by Dylan Patterson, who is the son of a friend of mine from university, which is a lovely thing. My friend got in touch, said, "Oh, my son loves Doctor Who," and I sent him a couple of things, and then he said, "Oh, he's made some art for you," and I went, "Actually, can we turn that into the things for my podcast?" So isn't that lovely? Anyway. So hopefully that little explanation is better than an official credit, although the credit listener in me is appalled that it's not actually part of the credits. But it was a case of either cutting off the last three names of that list, but that actually gets me, that's got me everybody in the alphabetical list, even though Sidney Wilson is obviously a pseudonym. It is. If you would like to be a patron of these podcasts, you can be so by going to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where I can rush to get your name before the closing credits run out, and as a result not credit a young person for the artwork that they've done. But it's because I am very, very grateful to the patrons who can join for as little as £3 per month, and you actually get a 10% discount on top of that if you sign up for a whole year in one go. You get advance releases, bonus material, exclusives, interaction, and there's a few extra trinkets as you ascend further up the ladder, but most things are available at the lowest tier because I try and make it as sort of fair as possible. You can also do one-off payments at kofi.com/Toby Hadoke if you don't want to commit to a monthly thing. That's perfectly understandable. But you know what costs you nothing? Just to go on iTunes or Podbean or wherever you get these podcasts from and give them a 5-star review and perhaps a couple of lines of nice comment just to help us to stand out from the crowd. Us. I make it sound very grand. There's a production team behind me and a whole load of creative brains. It's me talking on my sofa. That's all it is. What, you couldn't tell? It sounds like a slick operation, a machine with a production company behind it. No, it doesn't, does it? It sounds like a man scrabbling for something interesting to say. Anyway, if you've got this far, I admire your pluck because it's about to end up. We've even run out of musical stings. So we're just going to sort of dribble to an end, really. I hope you like that.